When you run a child package by using the execute path package task on a control flow, you can configure the child's properties using variable values from the parent package. For example, you can set the connection string for a file connection manager in the child package to a path stored in a parent package variable that was set by a for each loop container in the parent, one of many kinds of scenarios. You can set up this kind of configuration in the package configuration wizard by using the parent package variable configuration type. The wizard maps the child package property to the name of the parent variable that contains the correct property value. Parent package variable configurations behave slightly differently from other configuration types. A regular package's configuration values are loaded when either the integration services runtime or SQL Server Data Tools opens the integration services package. But the values for parent package variables are not loaded until the child package executes. Now there is one potential limitation of this technique, and that's if a child depends on the parent's variables. The child can no longer execute outside of the context of the parent. This problem is often easily solved, though, by carefully crafting of a configuration for the child as well. So you can start to imagine there's some very complex scenarios when you're dealing with parent and child packages. Another way of using configurations gives you a bit more flexibility in how you define the configurations and where they're found at execution time. And that gets into direct and indirect configuration. So the first item is direct configuration. Direct configuration means that the package has the location of the package configuration hard-coded within its definition, and that's stored within the package itself. So what that means is that whenever you define the path to an XML file, the connection string to SQL Server storage, or the names of registry keys or environmental variables directly within the package, you're performing direct configuration. Okay, so this includes the path to the configuration file. And in many cases, this type of hard coding is acceptable, where paths, keys, or servers are consistent across environments. In addition, if you build a package for execution in only one location, you're not going to deploy it to multiple servers and don't need to move it between development and production and test servers and so forth, then you can probably get away with hard-coded paths. But in environments where these configuration locations can change, direct configuration lacks flexibility. So the other option is indirect configuration. In indirect configuration, you also have a configuration file for each package. That doesn't change. But instead of hard-coding the path to the file in the package, you store the path in an environmental variable. The package queries the environment variable for the path and then loads the configuration file from that location. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about this in the sample files that I developed for this course. Because one of the challenges of designing and implementing this course has been that I wanted to develop samples and labs that are simple enough to let you focus on the key points of each module, while making it reasonably easy for you to load and execute packages easily after installing them to your hard drive. So many of the samples in this course, throughout the integration services courses, have hard-coded paths and connection strings to files in them, which is an inevitable part of working with resources outside of integration services and SQL Server Data Tools. I tried to make these as generic and universal as I could. And therein lay a dilemma. I could go with hard-coded paths and face installation issues if you decided not to install the files in the default location, and deal with those issues. Or I could use an indirect configuration, saving the main path in some configuration file. In the latter case, you'd still have to deal with the location of the configuration file, and for every new package you create in the course, you'd have to set up the package to use the configuration, adding probably several additional steps to virtually every package that you create in this course. And that's a lot over the duration of the entire course, set of courses. So I chose the direct configuration option in the hopes that it provides to be the easiest for you, letting you focus on learning integration services instead of spending a lot of time configuring sample packages. And that's why I recommend in the introduction that you install the files to the default location. If you didn't, you'll probably have to fix a package before running it, if you choose to execute it directly from the installation folder rather than creating it from scratch. And that's also why a lot of the exercises involve creating packages from scratch, so this isn't even an issue. But sometimes I just couldn't get around having to start with pre-built packages. Okay, but you'll need to make the same sorts of decisions as you develop your own packages that you'll deploy to other locations. So keep these issues in mind as you design a package. Here I am back in the control flow project that I modified earlier to use a configuration. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to convert this again in order to use an environment variable that points to the configuration file location. So this is going to use indirect configuration. Okay, but the first thing I need to do is actually create the environment variable where I'm going to store the configuration file path. The easiest way to do that is from a command prompt. So I'll just hit the Windows button and command prompt. And then I'm going to go over to Windows Explorer and cheat list just a little bit and copy the path. So I'll copy that. Come back over to my command prompt. And then I'm going to create the environmental variable using the set command. And I'm going to call this the SSIS config path. Nothing magic about that variable name. You can name it anything you want. And then I'm going to set that equal to that path that I just copied. And close the double quotes. Okay, so that's the path. And I also need to add the file name. Okay, and I'll hit enter, and it successfully created that environment variable. And by the way, you can also use the system applet in the Windows control panel in some version of Windows to create environment variables, but it's just easier in the command prompt. Okay, so I can verify that that was created. I'll just do set there, and someplace in this list there should be an SSIS config path to that sample files myconfig.dtsconfig. Okay, great. So I've created that environment variable. Okay, I'll go back over to SQL Server Data Tools, and I'll come up here to SSIS, and notice that because I now have a package configuration in this project, this Package Configurations option appears within the menu. So I'm not sure why Microsoft removed it, so I can't go directly to open that dialog box when I don't yet already have a configuration, but that makes it a lot easier to open this up. Okay, and I'm going to edit this existing configuration, which fires up the wizard again. I'll go past the welcome page. And here on the Select Configuration Type, I'm going to click this bottom radio button because I'm no longer going to hard code the location of that configuration file. I'm going to use an environmental variable, and I'll come down here. And as you can see, the variable doesn't exist. This is an alphabetical list. Okay, so the problem here is that SQL Server Data Tools loads the available environment variables when it launches. And the list isn't updated until you restart SQL Server Data Tools. Okay, so to get around that, I'm just going to type in the variable name here. I don't care that Data Tools didn't discover it, but I'm just going to type it in and be done with it. Okay, so hopefully I've spelled it correctly. Okay, so I'll click on Next, loop configuration is still the name, and Finish, and Close. All right, and so now when I execute this package, it's going to look for that environmental variable, look for the path and the file name, and then load the configuration from that location rather than it being hard-coded into the package itself. That's really pretty slick.